There is a great debate going on, and it is not about what you think. It is not about the presidential election. It is not about politics at all. It is not about the latest competition show or singing competition show that's out there and who should win over who. It is actually about, should I buy a home or should I rent? I know it's insane, but there is a big debate going on about this on social media. There are experts that are coming out now saying the controversial thing, which is that you should rent rather than buy sometimes. And they have a good argument. And there are kind of the old school financial people who are like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Don't tell people that. And where do I stand? I kind of stand in the middle because I think it's up to you. That's the big ending of this, right? It's up to you. But I think there's a lot of good points that are being made that should be highlighted. And we're going to go through those because it can get a little overwhelming when you got people kind of yelling back and forth at each other. So we're going to go through the myths. We're going to go through some of the facts that you need to think about and just give you that guidance to get through that fog in the real estate decision. And so let's start with the dream of home ownership. Now, everybody associates the American dream with home ownership, right? You own the house with the white picket fence. You've got the 2.5 kids and the dog. That's the American dream, or at least that's what used to be the American dream. I don't think that's the American dream anymore, to be honest. There's a lot of us out there. I don't have kids. I don't have a dog. I still feel like I'm living a really good life. Is that the American dream? I think it is, but maybe it's not. But that home ownership piece is still very much associated with the American dream. The sense of I am a successful adult because I own a home. And so a lot of people rush into home ownership or think that that should be on their goal list because that's the American dream. And is that really the right thing for everybody? It's not. It's the right thing for a lot of people, but there are a lot of people that probably shouldn't own a home. And so let's go through this. So let's go through the pros of owning a home first, okay? So there are a lot of pros to it. A, you have stability. B, you have a forced savings almost. You're saving into a mortgage every month. And by doing that, hopefully you're building equity up in your house, and you're going to have lots of choices later on because you'll have a lot of equity. You'll have not a huge payment anymore. And then you get to decide how you want to liquidate your house if you do. Or maybe you pay your house off and then you have the cash flow by not having to pay that anymore. There's just lots of different things. You have choices when you buy a house. You also have a sense of a discipline in many respects because these days it's hard to save a down payment. I mean, we're at very high interest rates, not record highs, but very high interest rates for what we've seen in the last, 20 years, something like that. And basically, you've got to save a lot if you want a reasonable mortgage. If you're not wanting to pay an extreme amount of money for a monthly payment, you're going to have to do a pretty big down payment. And it does build you discipline. You learn how to save money. And once you're done with that, you're saving your mortgage. And hopefully you have the ability to save some money elsewhere because you've learned how to save. You learn how to live in your means. And there's just also, I would say, an emotional part of owning a home. I kind of already touched on this, but there is that sense of like success. I own something. This is mine. And it's partially the bank's, but it's yours, right? You get to own your home. And there is something to be said about that. And so, home ownership has a lot of positive things. I'll be honest with you. I own a home. So obviously it works for me, but all of my clients, I'm a financial advisor and I work with people a lot. I've been doing this for 13 years, and a lot of clients, it's not the right choice for them. And so let's go through some cons of home ownership. It's expensive. I mean, it is expensive There's always something to do, and it always costs money. I will tell you that for a long, we've owned homes for a long time, and they're always expensive. You've got HOAs, you've got property tax, you got your mortgage, you got to update this, you got to change this out, the faucet's not working, this is not working, we got to update this. I mean, there's always something to do when you own a home. It's pain, right? And so that's a con. Also, another con is that it's not necessarily the rate of return that you keep hearing about. It sometimes can be, but it sometimes can be a financial disaster. Because let's say you own a home, and a lot of people take a look at their rate of return and they go, well, I bought it for this, and now it's worth this. Look at this rate of return I got. Isn't that amazing? But they're not actually taking a look at all the costs that are on top of the purchase price, right? So did you have to pay an HOA every month? How expensive was that HOA? What were your property taxes like? Did you update the kitchen? Did you update the backyard? Did you have to redo the bathroom? Did the pipes get redone? Did you have to update the electricity? All of those add up, and sometimes your rate of return is not as good. I mean, it's okay, but it's not as good. And sometimes it can go like this: what you put in, what the house is actually worth. It depends on the area you live in. We keep hearing, oh, everything's going up and up. There are areas still in this country where, people are still upside down in their homes because the area just lost the credibility, or I guess not credibility, but lost the want of people living there. There's always areas that aren't doing well in the housing market, no matter what kind of market we're in. And so you really have to keep that into consideration. I've had, in the past, I've seen neighbors that have come and moved in, and they're people who travel, who are going to be in the area for only about like 2 years. And I don't know if buying a house was the right choice for them. I've seen some of them do just fine. And I've seen some of them lose their shirts because they bought a home for 2 years and expected to get some rate of return off of it. That didn't happen. And they were upside down in the house and they had to move on because their job was calling them someplace else. So would I tell people not to buy a house if they only had a chance of living there for 2 years? No, because I don't know their situation. But I do know that there's a big risk when you own a house. Also, just, moving on to the pros of renting, it's flexible. You don't have flexibility when you own a house. You get to go and live anywhere, anytime that you want. You get to call the shots in some respects, because if your landlord pushes up the rent, you get to say, sayonara, I'm moving on, and find someplace else that you can afford that fits in your budget. You get to decide how and where you want to live. You're not tied down anywhere. You don't have those extra costs. In theory, you don't have those extra costs when it comes to property tax and mortgages and things like that. Now, I'm going to address this in the cons because I think that there's a little bit of a fallacy with this. But the whole idea is that you should be able to call your landlord and say, Jimmy, my dishwasher's not working. Come fix it, please. And Jimmy does it, and it's all within the cost of what you're already paying. And also, essentially, if you're not one of those people that think real estate is a very good investment, you do have the opportunity to invest in other places. You can invest in the markets, you can invest in your business and other people's businesses. You can do lots of other things. And I even have clients who don't own a home primarily, but they do own rental properties. And sometimes that works for them, right? You don't have to be a homeowner personally, and you can still own some real estate places. Okay, so those are kind of the positives of renting. The negatives are you don't have control over the cost. Now, this is where I disagree with that idea of you just call the landlord and it's all taken care of for you, because I'm going to tell you the opposite side of this, which is a lot of people who get into real estate and want to build real estate income as a secondary property that's going to generate income for them. They don't do the math very well. Okay. They just don't. A lot of them don't. They basically say, well, the rent should cover my mortgage. And as long as it's covering my mortgage, I'm good. And maybe it's mortgage and property tax, or maybe they actually thought it through and added HOA in there. But I tell you, I see all the time people who did not put into their rent prices, the amount of money it's going to take for upkeep, for maintenance, for increases in the HOA, for increases in property tax. They don't think ahead. And so, even though right now, as a renter, you are not paying for that cost, you will be paying for it because they are going to be raising their prices because they're going to go, I just realized I didn't price this right. And they're going to up their rent. Now, again, you have the ability to move on, but moving is expensive. I've had to move like 3 times in the last 3 years. It's not cheap. It's not cheap to move. So you really just going to keep moving around every time that they raise their price. You got to really think about that because you could be throwing more money away. And obviously, con to renting, of course, is that you're not kind of forced saving that. You're taking money and you're going, bye-bye, and you're never going to see it again. And essentially, that's what renting is. And so obviously, there's a lot to consider when you decide if you're going to buy or you're going to rent. And I think the biggest thing that this comes down to is that when you're listening to these debates about this back and forth on social media, they are not addressing the true issue. There's 2 things that you really need to think about. One is, what is my financial situation? What is my living style? What do I really want? And instead of thinking I want the American dream because that's what we've been told to do, really think about the lifestyle you're going to be living. Is your idea to retire early and then travel all over the country? Maybe buying a home doesn't make sense for you, right? But the other thing that you need to consider is you need to consider that they're acting like this is the choice that you have to make for the rest of your life. It's not. You can decide to rent right now and buy later. You can buy now and decide, I don't like home ownership so much, and in retirement, I'm going to travel around my RV, and so I'm going to sell my house or I'm going to rent it out. You don't have to make this a lifelong choice because you have choices in life. And so, when people try to scare you into saying you have to buy a house now because this is the lowest it's ever going to be, don't listen to them. They do the same thing with the stock market, right? You can't buy it later because it's going to always be more expensive. That's not always true. I mean, we got into our first house in 2008 because we took advantage of the prices being down. Do I see another 2008, 2009 happening? I don't know. I don't necessarily see one on the horizon. Nobody's talking about it, but you just never know. There are things that happen that make housing prices go down, and you could take advantage during times like that. But if you rent now, you don't have to rent for the rest of your life. You can buy later. You can buy now and rent later. You don't have to make it a one-size-fits-all for yourself. So I think it's really worth saying there's a lot of different factors that go into this. You need to make the right choice for you by considering all these different things and really asking yourself what you want now. And every 2 years, reconsider it, right? Because if you wait 5, 6, 7 years, that's kind of too long. But if you've decided to rent, maybe check in with yourself every couple of years and say, is this still what I want? Or do I want to buy a house? If you've bought a house and you just absolutely hate home ownership, which a lot of people do, then maybe you need to think about, is this the right thing for me? Maybe down the line, I want to sell it. So with that said, there's always a lot of gray area when it comes to this stuff. Everybody kind of tries to tell you it's got to be this or that, but there's really never a one size fits all. So you make the decision that's best for you. Make sure you consult with people who are not going to benefit from you buying a house or not buying a house. That's a big one. Real estate agents are wonderful. I love them, but they do have some motivation for you to buy a house. And so they think everybody should buy a house. And maybe that's not the right thing for you. So get a third party that really has your interest at heart and is not going to profit from you, from you basically buying a house or not. And so with that, I want to thank you for watching this. I do want to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think of this big debate that's going on, this controversy that's happening? It's hysterical to me. It's a controversy, but it kind of is. And what has your experience been from owning home or renting? Have you decided you're going to rent your whole life? Have you decided maybe I'll rent for now and, do something different in the future? What do you think? And what is your experience with home ownership or not home ownership? And what do you think about what all these experts are saying out there? And I put experts kind of in quotes because some of them are not that experts, but that's okay. Anyhow, and I'd love to hear more about that. And let's talk about the next video. So the next video is going to be one you don't want to miss. It's called Why You Should Quit These Financial Fads Now. There's a lot of bad information out there, and a lot of people are doing some really dumb things. And so we need to stop it. So I hope you tune back in for that next video. And there are some other videos that we have done that is very similar to these topics. One in particular is our net worth video of whether net worth really makes any sense to track or show that you are making financial gain. So I'm going to link that down in the description and let me know if that was helpful as well. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a wonderful, successful financial future.